She sat in seat 1A, wearing an oversized vintage hoodie and Beats headphones, looking like any other tired teenager. But when the flight attendant sneered, "Economy is back there, sweetie," she had no idea she was speaking to the sole heiress of an empire that could buy the entire airline before the wheels even touched the tarmac. They thought she was an easy target. They thought they could humiliate her to make room for a real VIP. They were wrong. What happened next wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a masterclass in power and revenge that shocked the world and brought a billion-dollar legacy carrier to its knees. You do not want to miss how this ended. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of overpriced coffee and the frenetic energy of holiday travel. For 17-year-old Chloe Washington, however, the noise was just white noise. She adjusted the strap of her well-worn canvas backpack, her eyes scanning the departure board for Flight 880 to London Heathrow. Chloe didn't look like the typical first-class passenger. She wasn't wearing a tailored blazer or dragging a Rimowa suitcase worth more than a used Honda. She was dressed for comfort, a charcoal grey hoodie from a robotics camp, black leggings, and scuffed high-top sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was clutching a bag of pretzel M&Ms. To the casual observer, she looked like a kid who had perhaps wandered away from a school trip. But inside her backpack was a prototype tablet, running code for a clean energy grid algorithm she'd helped design. And the dad she was texting was Robert Washington, the man whom Forbes had just quietly listed as one of the top 10 most influential venture capitalists in the Western Hemisphere. "Boarding for first class and diamond medallion members only," the gate agent announced, his voice clipped and bored. Chloe stood up, sliding her phone into her pocket. She approached the priority lane. The woman standing guard at the entrance, a woman whose name tag read Patricia, didn't even look up from her screen at first. When she saw Chloe's sneakers enter her peripheral vision, she stepped sideways, effectively blocking the path. "Excuse me, miss," Patricia said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension. "Zone 4 boarding will be in about 20 minutes. Please wait against the wall." Chloe paused, blinking. She was used to this. It happened at high-end boutiques, at hotel check-ins, and certainly at airports. "I'm in Zone 1, Chloe said softly, holding out her boarding pass. Patricia sighed, a long, dramatic exhale that ruffled her bangs. She snatched the paper pass from Chloe's hand, clearly expecting to point out the error. She scanned it. The machine let out a happy chirp. "Seat 1A, priority." Patricia's eyebrows knitted together. She looked at the screen, then back at Chloe, then back at the screen. She typed something furiously. She demanded, no longer sweet. Chloe handed over her passport. Patricia scrutinized the photo, looking for any reason to deny it. Finding none, she thrust the documents back at Chloe. She didn't say, "Enjoy your flight." She simply jerked her head toward the jet bridge. "Thanks," Chloe mumbled, stepping past her. As she walked down the jet bridge, the transition from the chaotic terminal to the hushed luxury of the aircraft was immediate. She stepped onto the plane and turned left. The first-class cabin on the Boeing 777 was a sanctuary of soft leather ambient lighting and the smell of fresh orchids. "Welcome aboard," a flight attendant said. She was tall, blonde, and wearing a uniform that was perfectly pressed. Her name tag read Brenda. She was smiling at the man ahead of Chloe, a businessman in a charcoal suit. As soon as her eyes landed on Chloe, the smile vanished like a candle blown out in a gale. "Can I see your stub?" Brenda asked, hand extended, palm open. Chloe showed it again. "Anne." Brenda stared at it. "One." She looked at the empty suite at the very front of the cabin. It was the most exclusive seat on the plane. "Are you sure you didn't swap with someone?" "No." Chloe said, her patience thinning just a fraction. "My dad booked it for me." "Right." Brenda said, her tone suggesting she believed Chloe's dad was a baggage handler who had pulled a favor. "Go ahead, but keep your bag under the seat. We don't want the overhead bins cluttered up here." Chloe didn't argue. She just wanted to sleep. She walked to 1A, tossed her canvas backpack into the overhead bin, ignoring Brenda's glare, and settled into the wide, plush leather seat. She put her headphones on, effectively shutting out the world. She didn't notice the way the other passengers looked at her. The whispers. Is she lost? Probably an employee pass. Unbelievable they let anyone in here now. About 10 minutes later, the cabin was mostly settled. Chloe had her eyes closed, listening to a lo-fi playlist, when a sharp tap on her shoulder jerked her back to reality. She slid her headphones down. Standing over her was Brenda, and looming behind Brenda was a woman who looked like she had walked straight out of a soap opera about wicked stepmothers. She was wearing a white fur stole, despite it being mid-July, and enough gold jewelry to sink a small boat. She was holding a glass of pre-departure champagne in one hand and a platinum credit card in the other. This was Beatrice Wellington, a socialite known in certain circles not for her charity, but for her ability to get restaurant managers fired if her water wasn't chilled to exactly 4 degrees. "There must be a mistake," Beatrice said, her voice loud and rasping. She wasn't looking at Chloe. She was looking at Brenda. "I always sit in 1A. My husband Charles specifically requested 1A. I do not sit in 1F. The lighting is terrible for my complexion." "I understand, Mrs. Wellington." Brenda soothed her voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let me handle this." Brenda turned her attention to Chloe. She didn't kneel down to eye level, which was standard protocol for speaking to seated passengers. She stood tall, dominating the space. "Miss," Brenda said, "I need to see your boarding pass again." Chloe sighed, digging it out of her hoodie pocket. "I already showed you." Brenda took it, staring at it intensely. "Okay. Here is the situation. We have a Diamond Elite Global Services member, Mrs. Wellington, who has a standing reservation for this seat. There seems to be a glitch in the system that double-booked it." "That sounds like a system problem," Chloe said calmly. "I have a confirmation number. I'm checked in." "Look," Brenda said, her voice hardening. "Mrs. Wellington is a very important flyer with us. We need to accommodate her. I have a seat for you in Economy Plus. It's an aisle seat. Very roomy." Chloe looked at Mrs. Wellington, who was currently inspecting her manicure, looking utterly bored by the inconvenience of Chloe's existence. "I paid for first class," Chloe said. "Or rather, my father did. I'm not moving to economy." "It's Economy Plus," Brenda corrected sharply. "And we will issue you a travel voucher for the difference." "I don't want a voucher," Chloe said, her heart starting to pound. She hated confrontation. She just wanted to go to London to visit her mother's grave for the anniversary. "I want the seat I'm sitting in." Mrs. Wellington let out a loud, theatrical groan. "Oh, for heaven's sake. Brenda, is this child going to hold up the entire flight? I have a dinner reservation at the Shard the moment we land. Get her out of here." Brenda's face turned red. She leaned in closer to Chloe. "Listen to me," she hissed. "You are causing a disturbance. If you do not move voluntarily, I will have to escort you off the plane entirely. Do you want to be stranded in New York?" Chloe looked around. The businessman across the aisle was pointedly looking out the window. No one was helping. She was 17, black and alone. They saw her as an intruder in their palace. "I'm not moving," Chloe whispered, though her voice shook. Brenda straightened up, smoothing her skirt. "Fine. Have it your way." She turned and marched toward the cockpit. The silence in the first-class cabin was deafening. Beatrice Wellington scoffed, placing her champagne on the console of the seat Chloe was occupying. "The audacity of youth," she muttered to no one in particular, though loud enough for Chloe to hear. "Probably spent her entire student loan on one ticket just to take a selfie." Chloe didn't respond. She picked up her phone. She had one bar of signal left before the doors closed. She opened her messages. To Dad. "They are trying to kick me out of my seat, saying I double-booked with some lady. Flight attendant is getting the pilot." She saw the 3 dots appear immediately. From Dad, who give me the flight number and the airline. To Dad, Royal Horizon Air Flight 880. Her name is Brenda. The lady is Mrs. Wellington. From Dad. "Stay in the seat, Chloe. Do not move. I'm making a call." Chloe locked her phone just as the cockpit door opened. Brenda emerged, followed by the captain. Captain Anderson was a thick-set man with silver hair and an air of absolute authority that he wore like armor. He looked tired. He looked like a man who just wanted to get in the air and didn't care whose feelings he hurt to do it. He walked up to row 1, adjusting his hat. Beatrice Wellington beamed at him. "Captain, finally, please explain to this young woman how the hierarchy works." Captain Anderson looked at Beatrice, gave a tight nod, and then looked down at Chloe. He didn't look malicious, just efficiently cold. "Mister," he said, his voice deep, "the purser tells me you're refusing a crew member's instruction." "I'm refusing to give up the seat I paid for," Chloe said. She tried to channel her father's boardroom voice, but she sounded small even to herself. "We have an overbooking situation," the captain said. "Mrs. Wellington is a priority partner. Under the conditions of carriage which you agreed to when you bought the ticket, we have the right to reassign seats for operational needs. We need this seat." "That's not an operational need," Chloe argued, her hands trembling in her lap. "That's favoritism. You just want to give her my seat because she's frequent flyer." "It is not your place to determine airline policy," Anderson snapped. "Now I am giving you a direct order. Gather your belongings and move to seat 34C. If you do not, I will have airport security remove you for failure to comply with crew instructions. That is a federal offense. Do you want a criminal record before you even finish high school?" The threat hung in the air like smoke. Federal offense, criminal record. Beatrice smirked. 34C is perfectly fine. Closer to the toilets, dear. Chloe felt tears pricking her eyes. It wasn't about the seat anymore. It was about the injustice. It was about the way they looked at her, like she was dirt that had been tracked onto a pristine carpet. "My father is calling corporate," Chloe said, clutching her phone. Brenda laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Honey, corporate is closed, and unless your father is the King of England, I don't think they're going to care about one teenager in a hoodie." "Actually," Beatrice interjected, "my husband is personal friends with the CEO of Royal Horizon. So if anyone is calling corporate, it should be me calling to complain about the delay." The captain checked his watch. "I'm done discussing this. We are losing our departure slot. Brenda, call the gate. Get security down here." "No need," a voice boomed from the front of the cabin. 2 Port Authority officers stepped onto the plane. They had been waiting in the jet bridge, clearly summoned by the gate agent Patricia earlier. "Is this the passenger?" the first officer asked, pointing a gloved hand at Chloe. "That's her," Brenda said, crossing her arms triumphantly. Refusing to follow orders. Trespassing, essentially. The officer looked at Chloe. Miss, you need to come with us. Now. Chloe looked at her phone. No new messages. She looked at the captain. He was checking the flight manifest, ignoring her. She looked at Beatrice, who was already settling her bag into the space by Chloe's feet, anticipating her departure. I didn't do anything wrong, Chloe whispered. Up! Now, the officer said, reaching out and grabbing her upper arm. His grip was tight, painful. Ow! You're hurting me, Chloe cried out, pulling back. Stop resisting, the officer shouted, creating a commotion that finally made the other passengers gasp. She's just a kid. Take it easy. The businessman across the aisle finally spoke up. Stay out of this, sir. Brenda snapped at him. The officer yanked Chloe out of the seat. Her backpack fell from the overhead bin, hitting the floor with a thud. Her headphones clattered against the console. My bag! Chloe yelled. We'll bring it, the second officer said, kicking the bag down the aisle. They marched her out. It was the longest walk of her life. She was paraded past the other first-class passengers, through the business-class cabin, and past the long line of economy passengers who were still waiting in the jet bridge to board. Everyone stared. Phones were out. People were recording. Chloe Washington, the daughter of the man who had just invested $200 million in clean aviation fuel, was being dragged off a plane like a criminal because a socialite wanted her window seat. As they reached the jet bridge, the humid air hit her face. The tears finally spilled over. She was humiliated. She was angry. But mostly she felt sorry for them, because she knew something they didn't. She knew her father. Robert Washington didn't get mad. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. Robert Washington was a man who played chess while everyone else was playing checkers, and Royal Horizon Air had just knocked over his queen. As the officers pushed her against the wall of the jet bridge to handcuff, her Chloe's phone, which was still clutched in her hand, lit up. From Dad, I'm at the airport. I was tracking your flight. Don't say a word to anyone. I'm coming to the gate, and I'm bringing the lawyers. Inside the plane, Beatrice Wellington settled into seat 1A with a contented sigh. Finally, she said, raising her glass to Brenda. Some peace and quiet. Brenda smiled. So sorry for the trouble, Mrs. Wellington. We'll be in the air shortly. The cabin doors closed. The engines whined to life. They thought the problem was solved. They had absolutely no idea that the problem was currently walking toward the gate in a bespoke Italian suit, flanked by 3 attorneys and a personal security detail with a look on his face that could freeze molten lava. The jet bridge door to the terminal was still open, though the aircraft door had been sealed shut. Chloe stood against the corrugated metal wall of the bridge, her wrists zip-tied. The 2 Port Authority officers, Officer Miller and Officer Davis, stood guard, looking bored and slightly annoyed that they had to babysit a teenager instead of patrolling the food court. Can you loosen these? Chloe asked, her voice raspy. They're cutting off my circulation. Procedure, kid, Miller grunted, checking his phone. You caused a scene on a federal aircraft. You stay tied until we process you at the station. I didn't cause a scene, Chloe said, staring at her sneakers. I just sat in my seat. Tell it to the judge, Davis muttered. Suddenly the atmosphere in the terminal outside the gate shifted. It wasn't a sound exactly. It was a sudden drop in the ambient noise level. The chatter of waiting passengers died down. The rhythmic clacking of dress shoes on the terrazzo floor grew louder, distinct, and purposeful. Patricia, the gate agent who had started this entire mess, looked up from her podium. Her jaw went slack. Walking toward gate B12 was a phalanx of people. In the center was Robert Washington. Robert was 6'4", a man whose presence commanded rooms before he even spoke. He was wearing a navy suit that cost more than Patricia made in a year. His face was unreadable, a mask of terrifying calm. Flanking him were 3 people who looked like sharks in human skin, his legal team. Behind them were 2 large men in suits who were clearly private security. They didn't stop at the rope barrier. They walked right through it. "Sir, you can't come back here," Patricia squeaked, stepping out from behind her podium. Robert didn't even slow down. One of his lawyers, a sharp-featured woman named Jessica Pearson, stepped smoothly in front of Patricia, handing her a card. "We are legal counsel for the minor, currently being detained unlawfully by your staff," Jessica said, her voice like ice. "Touch him, and you will be named in the lawsuit personally." Patricia froze. Robert reached the entrance to the jet bridge. He saw the officers. He saw his daughter. He saw the zip ties. The temperature in the jet bridge seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Daddy," Chloe choked out, her composure finally breaking. Robert stopped 5 feet from the officers. He looked at the zip ties on his daughter's wrists, then looked up at Officer Miller. His eyes were dark, dangerous. "Take them off," Robert said. It wasn't a request. It was a command spoken with the weight of a man who owned skyscrapers. Officer Miller bristled. He was used to being the authority figure. "Who are you?" "Back up, sir. This is a restricted area." "I am Robert Washington," he said, his voice low and steady. "That is my daughter. She is a minor. She is not armed. She is not a flight risk. You have restrained a 17-year-old girl for a civil contract dispute over an airline seat. If you do not cut those ties in the next 10 seconds, I will make it my life's mission to ensure you never work in security law enforcement or even a mall parking lot ever again." Miller hesitated. He looked at Davis. He looked at the lawyers standing behind Robert, who were already recording everything on their phones. "She was resisting removal." Miller stammered, his confidence faltering. "She was sitting in a seat I paid $6,000 for," Robert countered. "Cut them, now." There was a moment of tense silence. Then slowly, Davis pulled out a pair of cutters. He stepped forward and snipped the plastic. Chloe rubbed her wrists, rushing into her father's arms. Robert held her tight for a second, kissing the top of her head. "I got you," he whispered. "I'm here." Then he turned back to the gate agent, Patricia, who had followed them into the bridge, looking pale. "Where is the plane?" Robert asked. It pushed back," Patricia said, her voice trembling. "It's taxiing." Robert looked out the narrow window of the jet bridge. He could see the massive tail of Flight 880 moving slowly away from the gate. "Call it back," Robert said. Patricia laughed nervously. It was a hysterical sound. I can't do that, sir. It's departure time. The pilot is in control." Robert turned to Jessica. "Get the CEO on the phone. Now." "I'm already dialing," Jessica said. "And get the FAA liaison," Robert added. "Tell them we are filing an immediate injunction regarding a safety violation and the kidnapping of a minor's property." "Kidnapping?" Patricia asked, confused. "My daughter's bag is on that plane," Robert said, staring at the moving aircraft. "It contains intellectual property worth millions. You separated a minor from her belongings and removed her without cause. That plane does not leave the ground. Sir, You can't just stop a transatlantic flight because— "Watch me," Robert said. He pulled out his own phone. He scrolled to a contact labeled Senator Higgins Transportation Committee. He hit dial. "Hello, Jim. It's Robert. Yes, I'm at JFK. Listen, I have a situation involving Royal Horizon. They just assaulted my daughter and stole corporate espionage-level prototypes. Yes, I need the tower to ground Flight 880 immediately. I don't care if they're on the runway. Pull their clearance." Patricia listened in horror. This wasn't happening. This was a movie, but out on the tarmac the unthinkable happened. Flight 880, which had just joined the queue for the runway, came to a sudden halt. Inside the cockpit, Captain Anderson was going through the pre-flight checklist when the radio crackled. "Royal Horizon 880. This is Tower. Cancel takeoff clearance. Repeat, cancel takeoff clearance." Anderson frowned, grabbing the mic. "Tower 880. We are number 3 for departure. What's the problem?" "Weather, -880. We have a DHS hold on your aircraft. You are ordered to return to the gate immediately. Law enforcement is waiting." Anderson's blood ran cold. DHS hold, Department of Homeland Security. He looked at his co-pilot. "Did we miss a bag match? Is there a bomb threat?" "They didn't say," the co-pilot said, eyes wide. "Tower 880. Anderson said, his voice tense. "Returning to gate. Is there a specific threat?" 880, you are to return to gate B12. Do not, I repeat, do not open the cabin doors until instructed by the port authority." Anderson slammed his hand on the console. "Unbelievable!" He keyed the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We have been ordered by air traffic control to return to the gate for a security check. We apologize for the inconvenience." In seat 1A, Beatrice Wellington groaned, rolling her eyes. "Oh, typical. Probably that girl left something behind, and they're making a fuss. This airline is going to hear from me." She had no idea that the man she had just displaced wasn't just coming for the airline. He was coming for everything. The aircraft groaned as it docked back at gate B12. The passengers were murmuring, anxious. Security threats usually meant hours of delays, dogs sniffing luggage, and missed connections. Beatrice Wellington finished her champagne, looking annoyed. "Brenda, more bubbly while we wait. And tell the captain I want to know exactly who is responsible for this." "I'll do my best, Mrs. Wellington," Brenda said, looking nervous. She had seen the police cars flashing outside the window as they taxied back. The cabin door opened, but it wasn't the maintenance crew that entered. It was Robert Washington. He didn't yell. He didn't run. He walked onto the plane with the slow, predatory grace of a panther entering a sheep pen. Behind him came Chloe, looking small but defiant, and the 2 lawyers. Captain Anderson stormed out of the cockpit. "Who are you?" "You can't be on board." "This is a federal—" "Captain Anderson," Robert said, reading the man's name tag. "I am the reason you are back at the gate. My name is Robert Washington." Anderson paused. The name rang a bell. Washington, Venture Capital Washington Tech. "You stopped my plane?" Anderson asked, incredulous. "Do you have any idea how much fuel? You assaulted my daughter." Robert cut him off, his voice echoing in the silent first-class cabin. He turned his gaze to seat 1A. Beatrice Wellington froze her glass halfway to her mouth. She recognized him. Everyone in the New York high society recognized Robert Washington. He was the man you invited to your gala if you wanted it to matter. He was the man whose donation could build a hospital wing. "Mrs. Wellington," Robert said, nodding politely. "I believe you're in my daughter's seat." Beatrice spluttered. I didn't know. I mean, the system said." "The system didn't say anything," Robert said, stepping closer. "You bullied a child because you felt entitled, and you—" He turned to Brenda, who was pressing herself against the galley wall, trying to disappear. "You enabled it. You threatened a minor with arrest to facilitate a VIP request. That is a violation of FAA regulations regarding passenger removal, not to mention a PR nightmare." "I was just doing my job," Brenda whispered, tears forming. "Your job is safety," Jessica the lawyer interjected, stepping forward with a tablet. "Not concierge service for bullies. We have already filed a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation and the Airlines Ethics Board. We are also preparing a civil suit for emotional distress defamation and breach of contract." Captain Anderson stepped in, trying to regain control. "Sir, you need to get off my plane. We can discuss this in the terminal." "We aren't discussing anything," Robert said. "We are collecting my daughter's property, and then we are leaving. But before we go, I want everyone here to understand something." He turned to address the cabin. The business-class passengers were craning their necks to see. "My daughter sat in this seat because she earned it," Robert said, his voice carrying. "She is a top scholar. She builds clean energy grids for developing nations. She is worth 10 of you." He looked at Beatrice. "She was treated like a criminal because she didn't look like she belonged here, because she was wearing a hoodie, because she is black." "That's not true," Beatrice cried out, defensive. "I have black friends. I just wanted my seat." "It wasn't your seat," Robert said coldly. "It was hers, and you took it because you thought you could." He reached up to the overhead bin above 1A, where Beatrice's Louis Vuitton bag was now stowed, and pulled it out. He held it out to her. "Here," Robert said. "You can have the seat. In fact, you can have the whole plane. We don't fly with bigots." He signaled to Chloe. "Get your bag, honey. It's in the back where they threw it." Chloe walked down the aisle. The passengers who had stared at her with judgment earlier now looked at their feet, ashamed. The businessman who had tried to speak up gave her a small, supportive nod. She found her backpack in the galley, tossed on the floor near the trash compactor. She picked it up, dusted it off, and walked back to her father. "We're done here," Robert said. "You can't just disrupt a flight and leave." Captain Anderson shouted, his face purple. "I'm calling the police. The police are already here." "Captain," Robert said, gesturing to the jet bridge, where the Port Authority officers were standing looking sheepish and refusing to make eye contact with Robert. "And they aren't going to arrest me, because unlike you, they know when they've made a mistake." Robert put his arm around Chloe. "Come on. The G650 is fueled and waiting at Teterboro. We'll be in London before this rust bucket even de-ices." They turned to leave, but Robert stopped one last time. He looked at Beatrice Wellington, who was shrinking into seat 1A, looking smaller than she ever had in her life. "Enjoy the flight, Beatrice," Robert said. "I hope the legroom was worth it, because it's going to be the most expensive flight you ever took." They walked off the plane. The silence they left behind was heavy. "Well," the businessman across the aisle said loudly. "That was educational." Beatrice glared at him. "Quiet." Captain Anderson rubbed his temples. He had to explain this delay to operations. He had to explain why a billionaire just stormed his plane. And he had a sinking feeling that his pension was suddenly in very real danger. "Close the door," Anderson barked at Brenda. "Let's just go." Brenda moved to close the door, her hands shaking. She locked it. The plane taxied out again. They took off, but the karma hadn't even started yet. Robert Washington wasn't just a man who made scenes at airports. He was a man who understood leverage. And while Flight 880 was crossing the Atlantic, isolated from the world, Robert was on his private jet, making phone calls that would dismantle their lives before they even landed. The flight to London is 7 hours. That is a long time to be in the air while your world collapses beneath you. While Flight 880 was cruising at 38,000 feet over the dark, churning waters of the Atlantic, a very different kind of atmosphere pervaded the cabin of Robert Washington's Gulfstream G650, which was flying 5,000 feet above them and Mach 0.1 faster. On Flight 880, the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. The first-class cabin, usually a place of clinking glasses and polite chatter, was tomb-like. Beatrice Wellington had tried to engage the businessman across the aisle in conversation twice, seeking validation. "Can you believe the drama?" she had asked, swirling her warm champagne. People have no respect for hierarchy anymore. The businessman, whose name was Thomas Reed, a senior investigative journalist for the New York Chronicle, a fact Beatrice was disastrously unaware of, didn't look up from his laptop. "I'm working, ma'am," he said coldly. He wasn't writing an article about finance. He was currently uploading a 4K video file titled "Billionaire, Robert Washington's Daughter Assaulted on Royal Horizon Flight 80. He was using the onboard Wi-Fi, which was slow, but the upload bar was creeping toward 100%. Beatrice huffed and turned to her window. She felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She tried to dismiss it. "Charles will fix it," she told herself. Charles knows everyone. 5,000 feet above her. Robert Washington was not looking out the window. He was sitting at a mahogany conference table, his jacket-off sleeves rolled up. Chloe was asleep on a divan in the back, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, finally safe. Robert was on a secure video conference call. On the screen were 3 people, his chief legal officer, his head of public relations, and his personal broker at Goldman Sachs. "Status," Robert said, his voice calm but terrifyingly intense. "The video is out," his PR chief, Sarah, reported. "A passenger named Thomas Reed uploaded it 10 minutes ago. It's already trending on Twitter X and TikTok. The hashtag #boycott Royal Horizon has 50,000 tweets. The view count is at 2 million and climbing vertically. The optics are disastrous for them, Robert. The image of the police dragging Chloe while you stand there looking like an avenging angel, it's iconic." "Good," Robert said. "Let it burn. What about the airline?" "I've contacted the board of directors of Royal Horizon," his lawyer Edward said. "I sent them a preservation of evidence letter. I also informed them that we are pulling our corporate travel contracts. That's a loss of about $40 million a year for them just from our companies." "Not enough," Robert said. He turned to the broker. "Michael, talk to me about Wellington." Beatrice's husband, Charles Wellington, ran a private equity firm called Wellington and Partners. They were currently in the fragile final stages of a leveraged buyout of a massive retail chain. "Charles is overextended," Michael said, looking at his monitors. "He's waiting on a bridge loan from Barclays to close the deal on Monday. If that loan falls through, his firm is insolvent. He's leveraged everything he owns, including his Hamptons house and his shares in his own company." Robert took a sip of sparkling water. "Who is underwriting the risk on that loan?" "A consortium," Michael said, "led by BlackRock and, well, us. Washington Capital holds about 30% of the debt exposure." Robert smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Pull it." Michael's eyes widened on the screen. "Robert, if we pull the financing now, the deal collapses. Charles Wellington will lose everything. It's a nuclear option." "He let his wife treat my daughter like garbage," Robert said softly. "He raised a woman who thinks she can buy human dignity with a platinum card." Kill the deal, Michael. Call Barclays. Tell them Washington Capital has lost confidence in Wellington's liquidity. The deal is dead. Done, Michael said, typing furiously. And Michael, yes, Robert. Short Royal Horizon stock. Heavily. As soon as the markets open in London. I want their share price in the single digits by lunch. Robert closed the laptop. He walked to the back of the plane and looked at his sleeping daughter. She looked so young, so tired. He brushed a stray curl off her forehead. He went back to his seat and picked up the satellite phone. He dialed a number. Hello? A sleepy voice answered. It was Arthur Pendleton, the CEO of Royal Horizon Air. Arthur, Robert said. Robert? Arthur sounded confused. It's 3:00 a.m. in New York. Is everything okay? No, Arthur. Everything is very far from okay. Your staff just kidnapped my daughter. There was a silence on the line. Excuse me. I suggest you turn on the news, Arthur. And then I suggest you call your team at Heathrow. Because when Flight 880 lands, I'm going to be there. And I'm bringing the press. Robert, let's be reasonable. I'm done being reasonable. You have exactly 4 hours until your plane lands. I'd spend them writing your resignation letter. Robert hung up. Down on Flight 880, Beatrice Wellington finally managed to fall asleep, aided by her 3rd glass of champagne. She dreamed of shopping in Paris. She had no idea that by the time she woke up, her husband would be bankrupt, and she would be the most hated woman in the Western Hemisphere. London Heathrow Terminal 3, 7:45 a.m. The arrival of Flight 880 was usually a routine affair, but today the arrival gate looked like the red carpet of a movie premiere gone wrong. There were satellite trucks from the BBC Sky News and CNN. There were dozens of photographers. And standing right at the front, flanked by airport police who were looking very nervous, was Robert Washington. He had landed an hour earlier at Luton and taken a helicopter to Heathrow. He looked fresh, impeccable, and dangerous. Chloe stood next to him wearing a fresh outfit, a sharp blazer and jeans looking like the heiress she was. Inside the plane, as it taxied to the gate, the mood shifted from tense to terrified. Brenda, the flight attendant, turned on her phone as the plane slowed down. It exploded with notifications. Text messages from friends, links to news articles, angry voicemails from her manager. You are fired. Do not speak to the press. OMG. Brenda. You're on CNN. What did you do? She felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Captain Anderson. He was staring at his iPad in the cockpit, his face grey. He had just received a message from the chief pilot pending investigation, grounded immediately upon arrival. Ladies and gentlemen, Anderson said over the PA, his voice cracking slightly. We have arrived in London. Please remain seated. Beatrice Wellington woke up and stretched. She checked her makeup in her compact mirror. Finally, she muttered. She grabbed her Louis Vuitton bag, the one Robert had handled, and prepared to be the first one off the plane. The seatbelt sign turned off. Beatrice pushed past the businessman, Thomas Reed, not bothering to say excuse me. She marched to the door. Brenda opened the cabin door. She looked like she was walking to the gallows. Beatrice stepped out into the jet bridge, expecting her private driver to be waiting at the bottom of the stairs or the gate agent to whisk her through customs. Instead, as she emerged into the terminal, blinding flashes of light assaulted her. Click, 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 click. Mrs. Wellington. Mrs. Wellington, do you have a comment on the assault? Mrs. Wellington, is it true Your husband's firm has filed for emergency bankruptcy." Beatrice froze. She blinked against the camera flashes. "What? What are you talking about?" Then she saw him, Robert Washington. Standing 10 feet away, arms crossed, watching her with a look of absolute satisfaction. "You," Beatrice pointed a shaking finger. "You did this." "I didn't do anything, Beatrice." Robert said, his voice cutting through the noise of the press pack. "I just let the world see who you really are." A man in a cheap suit stepped forward and handed Beatrice a thick envelope. "What is this?" she shrieked. "You've been served, ma'am," the process server said. "Civil lawsuit for assault, defamation, and emotional distress. Plaintiff is Chloe Washington." Beatrice looked around for support. She saw Brenda emerging from the jet bridge. "Brenda, tell them I was in the right." Brenda looked at the cameras, looked at Robert Washington, and looked at Beatrice. She lowered her head. "I was just following orders," she whispered, distancing herself. Captain Anderson came out next. He didn't even look at the passengers. He walked straight into the waiting arms of 2 airline executives who were there to relieve him of his badge. Then the final blow. Beatrice's phone, which she had just turned on, began to ring. It was Charles. She answered it, desperate. "Charles, you won't believe what this man—" "Shut up!" Charles screamed on the other end. It was a sound she had never heard from him. "Shut up, you idiot! It's over! It's all over!" Barclays pulled the funding. "The deal is dead. The board is voting to remove me. We're ruined, Beatrice. What did you do on that plane? Who did you mess with?" Beatrice dropped the phone. It clattered onto the linoleum floor. She looked at Chloe. The teenage girl she had tried to banish to the back of the plane was now looking at her with a mixture of pity and resolve. "I hope you enjoy economy from now on," Chloe said quietly. Beatrice Wellington, the queen of the Upper East Side, collapsed onto a waiting bench, sobbing into her fur stole while the cameras rolled on. 3 months later. The viral life cycle of an internet scandal usually follows a predictable pattern: outrage, memes, apology, and finally, forgetfulness. But the incident on Flight 880 was different. It didn't just fade away into the digital ether, because Robert Washington wouldn't let it. He didn't just want an apology. He wanted an autopsy of the corporate culture that allowed it to happen. The fallout wasn't a ripple. It was a tsunami that washed over everyone involved, rearranging their lives in ways they never could have predicted during those 7 hours over the Atlantic. The karma that hit wasn't magical. It was structural, financial, and absolute. The fall of the House of Wellington. For Beatrice and Charles Wellington, the end didn't come with a bang, but with the quiet, suffocating sound of phones that stopped ringing. The Monday after the flight, Charles arrived at his office in Midtown Manhattan to find his keycard no longer worked. The security guard, a man named Hector, whom Charles had walked past for 10 years without ever acknowledging, looked at him with a mixture of pity and duty. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wellington," Hector said, holding a clipboard that felt like a shield. "The board has restricted access. Your personal effects have been boxed and courier-ed to your residence." Charles stood in the lobby, the glass revolving doors spinning behind him, realizing he was locked out of the empire he had built. The deal with the retail giant hadn't just failed. It had exposed the fragility of his entire operation. With Washington Capital pulling the bridge loan, the other investors spooked immediately. BlackRock withdrew. The credit rating agencies, sensing blood in the water, downgraded his firm's debt to junk status overnight. By Wednesday, Wellington and partners had filed for Chapter 11 protection. By Friday, the personal lawsuits began. Beatrice fared no better. The social exile was absolute. In the upper echelons of New York, society status is a currency more valuable than gold, and Beatrice was now bankrupt. She was disinvited from the Met Gala, a humiliation that made the Page 6 headlines. The creeping realization of their new reality hit her, not in a courtroom, but in her walk-in closet. "We have to sell the Birkins," Charles had told her one evening, sitting in their darkened living room, a glass of cheap scotch in his hand. "No," Beatrice had whispered, clutching a Himalayan crocodile bag as if it were a child. "They're my investment. They are who I am." "Their liquidity, Beatrice." Charles snapped, his voice cracking. "We have legal fees. We have the settlement with the Washington girl. We have nothing coming in. It's the bags or the apartment." They lost both. The penthouse on Park Avenue, the stage upon which Beatrice had performed her life of luxury, was listed quietly, then publicly, then at a fire sale price. They moved to a 2-bedroom rental in Weehawken, New Jersey. It was a perfectly nice apartment, the kind millions of people would be grateful for. But for Beatrice, it was a prison cell with a view of the city she used to own. Every time she looked across the Hudson River at the skyline, she saw what her arrogance had cost her. The reckoning at Royal Horizon. The airline tried to fight back initially. They issued bland corporate statements about misunderstandings and protocol nuances. But the video of Chloe being dragged down the aisle was loop-played on every news network from Tokyo to Toronto. It became a symbol of corporate overreach. The stock price didn't just dip, it cratered. Business travelers, the lifeblood of any legacy carrier, began defecting in droves. Corporate travel managers, spooked by the liability of their executives being treated like criminals or facing delays due to protests, switched contracts to Delta and United. Robert Washington didn't scream at the board meetings. He simply bought. As the stock price fell, he accumulated shares using the very crisis he exacerbated to seize control. 6 weeks after the incident, he walked into the Royal Horizon headquarters, not as a plaintiff, but as the chairman of the board. His first town hall meeting with the employees was legendary. He stood on the stage, no tie sleeves rolled up, looking out at thousands of pilots, flight attendants, and gate agents who were terrified for their jobs. "We are in the service business," Robert said, his voice amplified in the silence. "But we forgot who we serve. We thought we served status. We thought we served the platinum card. But we serve people. From today, the hierarchy is dead. If you pay for a seat, it is yours. If you treat a passenger with disrespect because of how they look, you will not work here. We are going to be the best airline in the world, not because we are exclusive, but because we are human." He introduced the Chloe Protocol, a mandatory training module for all staff on implicit bias and de-escalation. He fired the entire executive team that had authorized the police action, replacing them with leaders from customer-centric industries. As for the specific crew members, their fates were sealed by their own actions. Captain Anderson was stripped of his seniority and faced a humiliating FAA inquiry into his decision-making. He eventually took an early retirement package that was significantly lighter than he had planned. He spends his days on a golf course in Florida, complaining to anyone who will listen about woke culture, ruining aviation, though deep down he knows he failed the most basic test of a captain protecting his passengers. Brenda, the flight attendant who had sneered at Chloe, found herself unhireable in the industry. The aviation world is small. Everyone talks. She eventually moved back to her hometown in Ohio. She works in retail now at a high-end department store. Every time a teenager in a hoodie walks in, Brenda flinches a reflex born of deep, lingering regret. She is terrified of making a mistake. She has become the most polite employee in the store, haunted by the ghost of her own arrogance. The girl who changed the code. And what of Chloe Washington? She didn't do the talk show circuit. She declined an interview with Oprah. She didn't want to be the girl from the plane. She wanted to be Chloe the engineer. She returned to London and threw herself into her work. The incident had changed her, though. She was no longer the quiet girl who hoped no one would notice her. She had seen her father's strength, but she had also found her own. She realized that her silence in the face of injustice didn't save her. It only emboldened the oppressor. 3 months later, Chloe was back at JFK Terminal 4. She was heading to the gate for a flight to a climate conference in Geneva, where she was presenting her paper on microgrid stability. She walked with a new cadence, head up, shoulders back. She wore the same style of clothes, hoodie, leggings, sneakers, but she wore them like armor, now unapologetic. As she passed the economy check-in desks, she saw a commotion. A woman was arguing with a ticket agent. Her voice was shrill, desperate familiar. "I am telling you my bag is 2 pounds over. Can't you just let it slide? Do you know how much I used to fly?" It was Beatrice. She looked different. Her hair was dyed a sensible brown, likely to save on salon costs. Her coat was off the rack. She looked tired, her face etched with the stress of 1,000 indignities. She was arguing over a $50 baggage fee. Chloe slowed down. She watched from a distance, hidden by the flow of travelers. The agent, a young man who looked exhausted, shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The policy is strict. You have to pay the fee or remove items." Beatrice looked like she was going to scream, but then she just slumped. She unzipped her suitcase right there on the dirty floor and began pulling out clothes' old designer pieces that looked out of place in the fluorescent light, trying to lighten the load. It was a pathetic sight. The karma Robert had promised had arrived not with a thunderclap, but with the dull thud of a heavy suitcase on a linoleum floor. Chloe felt a moment of intense satisfaction, a flare of "I told you so." But it faded quickly, replaced by something else. Pity, no. Not even pity. Indifference. Beatrice was no longer a monster. She was just a rude woman, having a bad day, utterly insignificant in the grand scheme of Chloe's life. Chloe turned away. She walked toward the security checkpoint. "Miss Washington." A TSA officer was smiling at her. He recognized her. "Good to see you again. Right this way." He opened the velvet rope. Chloe smiled back. "Thank you." She walked through the scanner, grabbed her bag, the same canvas backpack, and headed for the lounge. She had a presentation to finish. She had a dad to text. She had a future to build. As she sat in the window seat of the lounge, watching the planes queue up on the tarmac, her phone buzzed. From Dad. "Saw you took off. Good luck in Geneva. Proud of you, kiddo. And hey, I checked the manifest. You're in 1A. No one is sitting there but you." Chloe smiled, typing back. "To Dad, I know. Love you, Dad." She put the phone down and looked out at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of purple and gold. It was a big world, and for the first time, Chloe felt like she truly had a seat at the table, or at the very least, the best seat on the plane. This story isn't just about a seat on a plane or a billionaire's revenge. It's about the invisible price tags we put on people. Beatrice Wellington looked at a girl in a hoodie and saw zero value. She looked at herself in a mirror and saw infinite worth. But the market and karma corrected that valuation brutally. Robert Washington didn't just use his money, he used the truth. He stripped away the costumes and revealed everyone for who they really were. It serves as a powerful reminder that in the age of cameras and connectivity, your character is your only true currency. You can lose your money, you can lose your status, but how you treat people is the one thing that follows you everywhere. So the next time you see someone quiet, someone unassuming, someone who doesn't look like they belong in the front of the line, remember Chloe. Remember that the person you dismiss today might be the one holding the keys to your tomorrow. Wow, what a journey. If you enjoyed this deep dive into high-flying justice and the ultimate karma slap, please hit that like button. It helps us get these stories out to more people. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you're the first to know when we drop our next story. We have a tale coming up about a tech CEO who went undercover as an intern and discovered his managers were stealing millions. You do not want to miss the twist ending on that one. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that being kind costs nothing, but being rude can cost you everything. Comment below. Do you think the punishment fit the crime? Did Beatrice deserve to lose it all, or was Robert too harsh? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.